Namaste, hello, and welcome to the Matriarch Movement podcast. I'm your host, Shayla Oulette Stonechild, and I'm super excited to have not only one of my friends, but someone that I'm constantly inspired by. I have Kairyn Potts here with me today. He is an Indigenous advocate, a content creator. You may have seen him on TikTok, on Instagram, and he's also a two-spirit advocate for inclusion and representation, not only across platforms, but also within his community. Kairyn Potts, thank you so much for being here and for joining us on the show here today.
Ishnish, hi. Thank you so much for having me. I'm pumped to be here.
Was there anything that I hadn't mentioned that you want to introduce the audience to?
No, but you made me sound so cool. And here's the thing, whenever I do like a bio or if I'm having somebody else read my bio, I feel like they get sick of like, he does this and he does this and he does this and he does this. But the thing is like, that's what I do. It's hard to be like, oh, I just do this one thing, because I don't really know too many Indigenous artists, especially in Toronto, who like just do one thing. So,
well, I mean, we're kind of like entrepreneurs. You kind of have no option but to do like several things at once.
I've only just started taking that like identity on in the last like year.
I was also going to say, and you're a triple Gemini. So like you have 16 different personalities already.
Yeah, you'll meet about 6 of them here, hopefully.
But I'm curious to know, like, where did this really start? Like, tell me about little Kai. Like, what made you want to get into being an advocate for Indigenous issues and for Indigenous rights? I
always tell people that my sort of existence as a political person wasn't really my choice. And I think that's true for a lot of Indigenous youth, is like, I don't get to choose whether or not I get to be political. I have to be. Everything that I do ends up being for some larger idea or, you know, some movement. And ever since I was a kid, I was always involved in the government because I became aware of the government at a really young age. And I don't know if a lot of people know this, but when I was like 6 months old, that was the first time I was ever apprehended on an emergency basis. So like, we're talking, you know, cops kick the door down, I'm thrown over the shoulder of like a fireman, and I'm put into a cop car and like taken away. And like, emergency apprehension only happens when there's like acute threat to life of the child. And that happened 4 times before I was the age of 5. Wow. So if that paints a picture of the kind of environment I was growing up in, I don't know what will, because it was just, it was a lot of drugs, a lot of alcohol, a lot of violence. And that's why I say, like, ever since I was not even 1 year old, literally Christmas Day is when I was apprehended. And I remember, like, ever since then, I was like, that was the trajectory of my life, was like, I knew I was going to be involved in this somehow, no matter what. Because I didn't age out of care until I was 24.
Mm-hmm. Well, that was going to be my next question, is where did you grow up?
I grew up, so I was born in Edmonton, in Mcleod in Treaty 6 territory. That's my home. But like I said, I was apprehended. I was actually put in foster care for 4 years. So between the ages of 4 years old and about 8, I was living in a small rural town called Sherwood Park, which is about half an hour, 40 minutes outside of Edmonton. And I grew up there not knowing that I was Indigenous, not knowing if my mom was dead or alive, not knowing any of my other family members. Because like I said, I was 4 years old when I was put there. So you don't really have too many memories when you're 4, especially during like all that period of trauma. I feel like a lot of it was repressed. But it wasn't until I was 8 that I really like figured out and was brought sort of back into my family.
Right.
My mom did pass away when I was 7. And then her eldest sister, adopted me and my brother and brought us back in from foster care. So I grew up in Edmonton and then just like a little bit in Sherwood Park.
So having your mom pass away at such a young age, you found kinship through your other family members.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, like, I never had a father. He left well before I was born. I don't even know his name. I don't know anything about him. So he just kind of was never in the picture. And I grew up with mostly my Magushin, my grandma, my aunties, my mom, my brothers, and that was kind of it. And so after my mom passed away, it was just going back into the family and having to kind of re-meet all of my relatives. I remember like they were familiar, but I was so young, I didn't remember them. And when I was in the foster system, I was baptized. I was brought to Sunday school. We went to church 3 times a week. I ate the body of Christ and drank the whatever. And like, I remember that was just a norm for us. And I went to a Catholic school. Like, it's giving residential school.
I also went to a Catholic school, and
Yeah.
like my older generation on my mom's side were very Catholic too. And so I think I didn't really start reconnecting to like my indigeneity and who I was until I was older. And for you, having lost your mom, not knowing who your dad is, having gone through the child welfare system, when did you really start to like question your own identity or like start to reconnect those pieces of who you are as an Indigenous person?
Really young, because no matter how white I thought I was, when I was younger, I was so dark. I know I'm not as dark now, but when I was young, I was really brown and I looked very Indigenous. And so no matter how much I thought I was white, I didn't look like my blonde-haired, blue-eyed friend Jason on the bus. I was different always, and I felt different always. And I knew I didn't look like other people. And I knew that there was something else there, because I knew that I was in a family that wasn't my family. And so it wasn't until I was adopted back into my family by my auntie that I got to continue. Like I felt like when I was taken away at 4, all of my like sort of identity kind of was put on halt. And then when I was 8 and brought back into the family, I was able to pick back up where I left off. And I was so lucky. I grew up in multiple reserves. I grew up a lot in the Enoch Cree Nation because I had family who was married into a family there. I spent a lot of my summers in Enoch, growing up in Cree culture. And then also I'm originally from the Alexis Lakota Sioux Nation, but I'm registered in Paul First Nation through my mom and my mom's dad. And I got to grow up there a little bit. So getting a really firsthand experience of like experiencing the culture as an Oskapio when I was younger. I was a helper in ceremony. I kind of didn't have any choice. Like my family was super traditional, and they were ceremony people. They were singers, they were dancers, beadworkers. And so I sort of just lived in the culture ever since I was a kid. I didn't know anything else except for that brief stint I did in foster care. So it wasn't difficult.
Well, I know you are a really big advocate for children that are still within the child welfare system. I know you had mentioned that the child welfare system here in Canada is largely made up of Indigenous youth, to the point where it's like over half of 50%. And so having gone through the system yourself, do you think that the system has changed at all, or do you think that it's still the same?
It's still the same in many ways, because a lot of the same governments are still in power. And it's much higher than 50%, especially in like prairie provinces like Alberta and Saskatchewan. I think in the last 10 years, at one point, it was upwards of like 86%, 88, 86% of all children in care are Indigenous. That's crazy. Like that's messed up. And when I was going through foster care, I remember seeing a lot of white families taking a lot of Indigenous children in, and hearing about the amounts of money that they were making to take care of each kid. Like I remember it was something like $3,300 for me, and then like $3,600 for my brother. That's crazy, because when we were put back into my aunt's care, my mom's eldest sister, they didn't give her anything. We got orphans benefits, which I think was like $70 a month. So the difference in support for like wanting to keep Indigenous kids with their families versus all of these foster parents who are making so much money and living in these big lavish houses, taking these kids, and then I wasn't allowed to talk to my family. I didn't have any contact with any of them. I didn't know my language. I didn't even know that I was Indigenous. Like there's actually a class action lawsuit going on right now, which I'm a part of, to offer some compensation to a lot of us who missed out on some pivotal times of development as kids, wherein we didn't have any access to culture, we didn't have any access to tradition or family, and the amount of like damage that is done, because that's so much time you're never going to get back. Like I was a baby, I was a kid, I needed to spend time with my mom, and then to know that my mom died while I was in care fighting to get me back, and her sister had to take up the fight after her, like what I wouldn't give to have those extra 4 years with my mom, you know, like stuff like that. Or maybe would my mom still be alive if I wasn't taken away? Because she got into drugs after we were taken away. She overdosed, you know? So like that sits on my mind a lot. And that's, I think, a big reason why like I'm fueled to do what I do, because I don't know any other calling. Like I feel like I'm answering a calling. I'm not really like chasing something, you know?
Well, it's coming from within. And I think losing a parent and like dealing with grief, it really catalyzes you into like who you're meant to be, and also to show other people that they're not alone. And I think a lot of Indigenous youth and Indigenous kids can relate to your story. And also just having to deal with your mom falling into addiction. Like I can also relate with my dad going through waves of addiction. And thank you for sharing that part of your story, because I know it's not easy. And I think sometimes when we speak about it, it brings up those feelings again. But
Sorry, I'm cutting you off because I realize I'm not being totally truthful. My mom didn't overdose. She was a heroin user who did intravenous drug use. She ended up getting HIV and she passed away from complications with HIV. The reason I default to saying that she overdosed is somehow it feels easier to say that. And I was told that she died of cancer up until I was like 13 years old. And then when I became a teenager, they were like, okay, he can know the truth now.
Right.
And drugs have always been something that have been so prevalent in my family, in my immediate family. My older brother Dominic actually passed 3 years ago in April from an overdose, and I just lost my sister last month, 4 weeks ago, to drugs. And so drugs kind of have like infiltrated every single area of my life, and that addiction that comes with that, it really has just left this wound, I think, that I'm still always trying to heal. But one thing that came out of it was the fact that like my path has never been more clear. I know what I need to do. I get so passionate and so involved when I'm trying to help young people get out of mental health issues or navigate the system, and trying to give them tips and support on how to survive what so many young people don't survive. Like I'm surprised I survived. There were so many opportunities, about 3 different times in my life where I truly felt I wasn't going to. I didn't think I was going to live past 25, and I'm 30 now. You can let that part out. But yeah, like I'm leaving youthhood now, and I'm like so happy that I am, because I know that that's a privilege that was denied to so many people in my family, and especially a lot of people in my community. You see how many like young people are overdosing and like committing suicide. It's so sad. And so I count my blessings, and I'm glad that I was able to make it through. But now it's my turn to do my best to make sure that I help as many young people as I can.
Well, and I think that brings me kind of to my next question of why Indigenous representation and inclusion is so important, not only within social media, but within campaigns, within podcasting, within gaming. For you, like, what would your advice be for maybe the younger generation of Indigenous youth that maybe are dealing with addiction, or maybe feel like that they don't want to be here anymore? Like, what would your advice be for an Indigenous youth just wanting to, like you said, like survive, but not only survive, but like thrive?
Something that's really cheesy that I tell, it's cheesy, but it's true, that I tell young people whenever I'm traveling or I'm doing like workshops and stuff like that, is like, the sun is going to rise tomorrow. The darkness isn't going to last forever. The sun will rise, and you deserve to be happy and wake up and smile with it. And I tell that to so many young people, because I was in that place where I literally, like, the darkness almost took my life. And I remember one day just being like, under a waterfall in South America, in Colombia. I went on a trip there, and I remember like sitting under the waterfall and feeling so like, oh my God, I can't believe I'm doing this. Like, is this my life? And that feeling of like, this is so amazing. I immediately thought of like me, you know, in my shitty little 1-bedroom apartment when I was 17, crying and like self-harming and like trying to take my own life, and like how big of a contrast that was, and how if I had gone through with it or been successful, I would not be under this waterfall having the most amazing time in my life. And I remember truly thinking like, wow, it really does get better. And people say that all the time, and they say that because it's true. And you know, the darkness does not last forever. And I tell young people that so much. Like, you would be so amazed at what like one full day can change in your life, in your spirit, in your heart. You have to just be open to letting that light in, I think. And sometimes our young people, they're hurt and they carry around that darkness with them. But every now and again, there's little parts that shine through and kind of creep through the clouds, and to look forward to those more and try to do as many things as you can in your day-to-day life that make you happy, and then just keep replicating those things, because like, and also just be a kid. Like I tell young people, you don't have to grow up tomorrow and like all of a sudden be super successful. There's like this idea that like you see all these Indigenous people on social media being so like badass and like conquering the world and doing 20 million projects a month, and you're like, whoa, like you're one of those people. I'm one of those people. There's people in the room who are like that, and you look at them and you're like, how do they do all that, right? It's because they lean on their friends. They lean on people to support them. They reach out. They're not afraid to ask for help. And so I tell young people, like, you're never alone. Reach out for help. You don't have to carry that burden alone, and take it, one step at a time.
I feel like you're talking to a piece of my soul, though, because I low-key do those things out of, I think, survival instincts, because I feel like having been grown up with no money or no access to like generational wealth, I oftentimes am doing 20 different things because I feel like I will be poor like my whole life. So it's kind of like a survival mechanism.
Well, it's trauma.
Yeah, it's trauma.
Trauma response.
And I know that we carry our trauma in different ways. And I know online, sometimes you can see other people inflicting that trauma onto other people, whether it be through the comment section, whether it be behind closed doors. And I know for you, you've talked openly about how you do get a lot of trolls, you do get a lot of comments online. And so like, how do you reclaim your power, and how do you reclaim your connection to your spirit when other people may be questioning your very own identity and what you stand for?
I am a double Gemini, so my response to people telling me to kill myself, or people telling me that I'm not valid, or like I'm just a white kid who like can't decide if he's a girl or a boy, or I'm a abomination, or I'm I was just in a First Nation actually 2 weeks ago. I'm not gonna say which, but I did a workshop in a reserve, and there was an elder there who, after my 2-hour presentation about, loving young people and letting them be who they are and supporting them and uplifting them, he decided to give a 15-minute diatribe about how I'm unnatural, and that how I go against all of the teachings that he has, and like how his daughter wants to transition to be a boy, but in his house he'll never allow that, because it goes against natural law and it's not what Creator wants. And he was only one of 2 elders who spoke up against me at this big, like 100-person conference. And I remember thinking, like, these trolls and these haters and these people who are sometimes just downright evil and mean, they don't just exist online. Like I deal with that in real life too. I have people who sometimes will like protest against me coming to like certain nations, or like will try to intimidate me. Older like Native men will like ask me to not come into a room, or they'll tell me like, you can come but you can't wear that if I'm wearing a ribbon skirt. Or like, I deal with all of it in person as much as I do online, and I deal with it all kind of depending on where my spirit is at in that moment. Like I'm two-spirit, and I'm like fire and ice, and sometimes you get the fire, sometimes you get the ice. Sometimes I'll ignore it. I'll be really icy. I'll report, block, move on. Mm-hmm. But sometimes I won't. Mm-hmm. Sometimes if somebody says something so unbelievably cruel and just sick, to me, it's not even about me at that point. It's like if this person owns a business, or if they're in politics, or if they have any type of influence in society, I will sometimes like go after their employer, or I'll like give a phone call to an organization they're a part of, and I'll just send them the screenshots and say like, hey, like, I just want to let you know, like, this person who feels these things and who threatens people like this and who's a violent person works for you, or like represents your company, and is like, has no problem writing all of their like employment information in their bio, and then going around and telling Indigenous youth, who have the highest rates of suicide in our country, who are already struggling enough, you're going to go around and tell them, oh, you should be scalped. You're disgusting. You're gross. Oh, bring back the schools. They missed a couple of you. Like the amount of things that people say like that, I'm just like, okay, now it's not about you and I. Now it's like, I want people to see that this is real. That's a big part of advocacy too. And I think that some people don't, they see me as being a troublemaker, or like, oh, why would you put all that effort in to like, you know, hurt this guy's reputation and da da da. It's like, it's so not about that. It's just about letting people know. Like a big part of advocacy is awareness. I speak up for our young people who say like, we get bullied. People don't make space for us. People tell us to kill ourselves. And then people roll their eyes and go, oh yeah, sure. I'm sure that happens too. No, it literally does. And here are some screenshots, and I'm sending them to your employer, and good luck.
Well, and I think it's about awareness, and it's also about accountability. Like I think if other people knew what they were saying, like they would then maybe take accountability for what they were saying. You would hope. And that brings me to my next question. You mentioned Indigenous youth feeling like they don't want to be here. We had the highest rates of suicide. What is top of mind for Indigenous youth today? Like now that you have traveled across the country, what are Indigenous youth really advocating for right now?
I think Indigenous youth want joy. If you look around, you see how many Indigenous youth are starting to make content or are starting to do different things in the arts, or who are joining sports teams, things like that. We're now starting to experience a lot of Indigenous joy through things like comedy, makeup, acting, all of these amazing television shows and movies. You know, shout out to Imaginative for putting on such a great display of that. Like that, you can see the Indigenous joy when a young person gets to see themselves on a screen, or gets to laugh at an insider joke that like maybe only we know. Those kinds of things we've lacked for so long. We've lacked YouTubers, podcasters, makeup gurus. We've lacked pro gamers. We've lacked influencers. Like when I was growing up, I watched Shane Dawson and Niga Higa and Michelle Phan, like these OG YouTubers, and I saw representation for so many people, never Indigenous people. It wasn't until like the last 3-ish years that we started to really see some role models and some just cool people. I wanted to log into the internet and see cool ass Indigenous people just having fun. And it seems like everywhere we go, it's just trauma, 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 trauma. And one of the biggest things that we need for our young people is to allow them to be young people. They have the right to play. They have the right to have fun. They have the right to laugh and to not feel bad about it. You know, they don't need to conquer the world tomorrow. Like, we are in the process of healing. How can we reconcile and immediately get to this place where we're self-actualized and we're healed, and, you know, all this trauma has been healed? No, like, let us heal for a bit. It doesn't need to be solved overnight. I think our young people just need a break a little bit sometimes, and like to not be pressured by everyone to go to university and get a degree tomorrow, and like make sure you make your family proud and learn your language while you're at it and go back to ceremony, but also move away to the big city and make something of yourself and make a lot of money and buy a house and do this and do that. And it's like, they're just trying to eat and, you know, smile every once in a while sometimes.
No, now that you say that, there is kind of like a lot of responsibility on your shoulders, not only like for your family, but also your community. And yeah, you just feel like you hold maybe sometimes a lot of weight. I know when I'm saying yes to certain things, I'm not just thinking about myself, but I'm thinking about like, oh, is this going to align with even my community? And there's a lot of things that are at play. But you did mention the power of Indigenous representation across all platforms. And that brings me to my next question of, could you tell listeners a little bit about Nichi Clan? I know you funded Nichi Clan, which is really focused on amplifying Indigenous voices and representation within the gaming world. How has that experience been for you? And what is Nichi Clan all about?
It's been absolutely phenomenal. I have been having an absolute blast doing it. I co-founded Nichi Clan with one of my good friends and just OG native influencer extraordinaires, Shannon Baker. And we founded Nichi Clan in 2022. Yeah, 2022. And it started as just this small little idea. We met in LA. I met her in person actually for the first time because I was just a big fan for a long time. I would watch her,
I've been following Shannon for years.
Everybody has been following Shannon for years. And I was just a big fan. And we ended up getting to go out for like food together. And we were sitting together and she's like, I can't believe you're a gamer. And I'm like, I can't believe you're a gamer. Like, what the heck? And we just like bonded over food. And then I remember we were sitting together later after we had filmed a series of mine called Res Mean Girls, and Shannon was starred in that. And I remember we were sitting together later, and she was like, "Why isn't there like a gaming organization for Indigenous people? Like, I only like playing with Indigenous people who like are friendly. Like, I don't want to play with toxic strangers who like scream at me." And like we bonded over this shared annoyance of like just the most basic, toxic, shitty little white kids who scream at you in online video games, call you every name in the book. They're so rude to women, and they're so homophobic and transphobic. And the internet is just not a safe space. And especially in like competitive gaming, it's vile. It's so bad. And so we were just like, why don't we make one? We should just make one. And I kind of was like looking at Shannon. I'm like, yeah, sure, we'll just make one. And she was like, no, for real, let's make one. And I was like, actually, yeah. Because, you know, if you know me, you know, I have the audacity to think I can do anything.
Yeah.
And I'll do it. And I'll get like pumped and I'll get passionate. I'm like, okay, where's the grants? Who can we call in to help? Who's like an expert at this? Like, let's do this tomorrow. Let's set up a meeting. Like, I'm bang, 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 bang. And Shannon's like that too. And so now we have Nietzsche Clan, which is an online community first and foremost. We have 600 members now.
Wow.
And we just launched like 2 months ago. This is our 3rd month. And we've partnered with EA Sports, which incredible. Nietzsche Clan is doing their first ever all Indigenous Apex tournament coming up this month for National Native American History Month in the States. And we're giving away like between 10 to 15,000 in prizes to like young people.
You need to tell me what an Apex tournament is, because I do not game. I've watched my brothers game, and because of all the feedback that they got through their headphones, I never wanted to game because you're literally getting yelled at all the time.
It's so toxic. Yeah.
So what is an Apex tournament?
Apex Legends is a video game.
Oh, Apex Legends.
Yeah. So the game is called Apex Legends.
Okay.
It's a battle royale game.
Okay.
Which means you're in a plane and there's 100 of you. You jump off the plane onto an island, and then a ring of like death comes in, and you have to be the last team to survive at the very end. Okay. That's as simple as I can make it.
That's a pretty good explanation. Yeah. I have to give it to you.
EA is the creator of that game. And it's probably one of the most, if not the most played game by Indigenous people. And
so what does indigeneity have to do with gaming? Like, how do they kind of go hand in hand?
Well, Indigenous people have been at the forefront of technology and innovation and of creating games and creating fun. Like, we have been having fun and creating really intricate games. Like, so like we're talking way back, like you know those games where they put the little hoop and they shoot the arrow through it. Then they have like lacrosse, like sledding, all of these like really amazing games. Like, Indigenous people have been masters of technology and been at the forefront of that for so long, and it's just it's such a shame that there are so many barriers to entry in video games, because look at our reserves, look at where most of our Indigenous people live. They can't even open Facebook, much less live stream or do content creation or like play video games online. There's just no way. And many of them are living in poverty. They don't have access to that kind of stuff. And so part of Nietzsche Clan's goal is I'm reaching out to Rogers and Bell, and I'm going to try to host LAN tournaments. LAN meaning local area network, meaning you're in the same room together. Okay. So LAN tournaments in different nations and challenge these big conglomerates to fund connectivity and give Wi-Fi and internet to like good internet to these nations. And that'll just create so many more opportunities. That's why we don't have Indigenous people in gaming. It's why we don't have them in video game design, in voice acting, in 3D animation. We don't have them in like game casting, or you know, they're not YouTubers and stuff like that, because many of them just don't have the access to A, the technology, B, the training, and then C, just the internet.
Yeah, the high-speed internet. That's why also wellness is a privilege. Having access to like wellness sessions online and virtually is a privilege in itself.
And healthy food.
And healthy food, exactly. Yeah. Like there's so many things. But I think that's a great idea that you're getting these kind of big players to hopefully fund Nietzsche Clan and to also fund all the other things that you're up to. What has that partnership been like for you through EA games or sports?
So they're called Electronic Arts.
Electronic Arts.
Yeah, they have EA Sports and then EA. They're two separate things under the same umbrella.
So you're connected
EA
to
Sports.
Sports
Is like, we're talking NFL, NBA, all the like FIFA games.
Okay.
And then EA being like The Sims and being like all the Star Wars games. And like, yeah.
So I was more of an EA person growing up.
Yeah.
Because I played The Sims.
Right, yeah.
Okay, so how is that partnership with EA?
It's been really good. Actually, the way that it started was 2 years ago, I got a random DM from an artist who was not Indigenous, but was a part of a like diversity and inclusion committee or council in EA. And she was like, we don't have, like, I'm a big fan of yours, Kai. I work for EA. I didn't realize you were a gamer. I do a lot of the artwork for FIFA, for the FIFA game. And I'd love to meet you. Like, I would love for you to come in and talk to like our group about like Indigenous representation and things like that. So that was 2 years ago.
Right.
Like in like mid-COVID. And I ended up moving to Vancouver for a little bit, for like 7 months. While I was there, I got to go and meet them in person, EA, and had supper with them. And then that partnership just, it was a long time coming. Like I've been barking up that tree for so long. And then finally EA was like, hey, we want to do a campaign with you and Nietzsche Clan. And so we did the Sims 4 partnership with Nietzsche Clan a few months ago, and it was the first sort of big thing that Nietzsche Clan did right at launch. It was so incredible, and it was so much fun to bring in other Nietzsche Clan members who I had personally recommended, and just create some really good, like, it was nice to see the conversations of like back and forth emails for 2 years, and like wishing and hoping and wondering and waiting to hear back and wheels spinning and nothing really happening, to now they're going to be helping us with sponsoring the tournament. And we just did the Sims 4 thing. And it's just now like, it's a lot of hard work, this is always hard work, right? Like trying to get money from people and trying to convince white people that Indigenous youth are worth it. And to not only be like, yeah, good job, good luck, guys. I remember in one meeting they were like, well, what kind of portfolios do you guys have in terms of like being a gaming organization, and like what have you done, how are we going to get a return on our investment, and I remembered being in the meeting with them, and there was like 6 of us in there, and I remember saying like, we don't have any of that. I don't think you understand, like, Indigenous, we're starting from scratch here. We're asking you to take a leap of faith on us because we need it, because we're so underrepresented, because no one else is going to do it. How are we supposed to get to here if we can't even enter the playing field? Like, you need to take a chance on us. And I promise you, like, it's going to be worth it, because Indigenous youth are incredible and they're so creative. And like, you will get the return on investment by knowing that you're literally decolonizing Canada and decolonizing a really underrepresented area in media, which is esports.
I mean, I guess I've dealt with similar things in different ways. And I think as Indigenous people, we've been denied the right to exist within the economy for literally centuries. So obviously we're not going to have the history to back that stuff up with. And I do think it is up to non-Indigenous people to kind of take a chance on us and to also show the magic that we have the ability to create when they do give those chances. I can relate to your story in a way, having worked with Lululemon for like 5 years. Right. And a lot of people don't see the relationships that you're building behind the scenes, because it really does come down to relationships as well. Totally. It's not only about the money or the transaction. It's about building that long-term relationship or connection with someone. It does come down to relationship. And so now, having gone through the process of creating a relationship with EA, having advocated for Indigenous inclusion within the gaming world, what is your advice for non-Indigenous people when it comes to creating relationships or when it comes to establishing, I don't like using the word reconciliation, but when it comes to supporting us as Indigenous creators and as Indigenous advocates?
Oh, there's so many things that they can do. First of all, hire Indigenous, prioritize hiring Indigenous people. And when you're going into collaborations with Indigenous people, understand the worldview and the perspectives that we're coming from. I think it's really important to educate yourselves on like who Indigenous people are, where they live, whose land you're on, basic things like that before you even go into like working with Indigenous people in your business. Create opportunities for mentorship, create positions wherein you can use your experience to maybe help out an Indigenous person who wants to be a part of that sector or wants to be a part of that field, who maybe doesn't have the experience or the whatever opportunities. Go in and make those and make it a point to like create them and to go out and seek someone to fill that role, and create training for any type of team you're on, whether it's a nonprofit or a company or whoever in a school. Like, you need to make sure that people are constantly being educated. There's so many people who, it's so frustrating trying to like explain something so that I think is so basic about Indigenous people and having people be like, what's that? Or like, oh, I didn't know that was a thing. Or like trying to explain like, oh, like, oh, I have an Inuk friend. Oh, what's that? And I'm like, oh my God. Like, like we're so for some people we're starting way before like they don't have any of the knowledge to even like have a conversation about your identity or about your lived experience. And so I think that sometimes it's just about going back to the basics. Like there's a free course through the U of A that like Dan Levy even like famously endorsed, that is so good. That is free. It's in modules. It's at your own pace. Everyone should be taking that as just like a bare minimum to undo a lot of the like downright propaganda and all of the education and curriculum that has been left out and purposely misinterpreted and rewritten in schools, especially where I grew up and you grew up in Alberta, like learning about the fur trade and all that kind of stuff and realizing it was all just bullshit, and like and then not even hearing about Indigenous people until I'm in like university. But meanwhile I'm learning about Brazil and I'm learning about Japan and I'm learning about China and I'm learning about, and I'm like, none of these people even like have even heard like one Indigenous word in their lives, and yet they live in Amescatuaskahikan. Like, anyway, so.
No, I haven't even taken that course, so I should be listening to you right now.
Take it. It's free.
Well, and I think going back to basics too, I think the term Two-Spirit is also very new to a lot of people that are non-Indigenous or that are learning about Two-Spirit identity right now. And so in your own terms, how would you define what being Two-Spirit means to you?
It's a good question because there's a lot of controversy, I think, surrounding the term Two-Spirit and the way that people use it. I use Two-Spirit as a placeholder term, as like an English word placeholder, to describe something that in my community exists, and that's I guess what you would call like winkte or wiankte, somebody who is like a male-bodied person who maybe moves through the world kind of like a woman would, in a very loose English translation. But really what Two-Spirit has like come to be for me now is a responsibility. It's a role, I think, to be somebody who educates and somebody who helps, somebody who is of service and who is gentle and who does their best to counsel and mediate and go in between. My understandings and in my Two-Spirit teachings and in my journey of trying to learn about what Two-Spirit is, because like, trust me, it's been a journey, and it's been one that I've been on since I was like 3 or 4 years old when I first had my family members call me Two-Spirit. Before I even knew what that even was, I was already being called that. And Two-Spirit has just kind of been pushed, not on me, but like I have realized this path has like been one that was like going to collide with me at some point. Yeah. And I'm glad that it did, because I learned so much about myself, and I learned about my femininity and my masculinity too, which is really beautiful. And so Two-Spirit, yes, is a relatively newer, if we're talking like 1990 being new, newer English word to describe a concept that has predated the English language and has existed time immemorial. Like no matter who you ask, all of these elders will tell you that there has just always kind of been two-spirit people or two-spirit people. And I say two-spirit because we're talking Nijmanatuag, meaning two-souled person, or like Ayakwe, or like Ikwe, or Winkte, or, you know, sub in any kind of indigenous language that has those beliefs. You'll see them all over the world, not even just Turtle Island. You'll see them in New Zealand. You'll see them in Asia. Like, this is not a new thing. And I identify as two-spirit because it's easier for me to say that for people who don't understand my culture, who don't speak my language, as a way to tell them that I'm queer and indigenous, but that it's also more so a spiritual identity that encapsulates my sexual orientation, my gender identity, how I present myself, and the ways in which I'm useful to my community. And to me, I take that so seriously because that's literally why I do what I do, is because I was taught you're going to have a hard life, but you're going to help a lot of people. And so as a Winkte person, or as somebody who's two-spirit, I wouldn't call myself two-spirit if I wasn't out there doing the stuff that I'm doing now. I would just call myself indigiqueer.
I've often heard the term two-spirit defined as in having a balance of the masculine and the feminine. Would you say that that's kind of how it is?
For me, yeah. Maybe not for everybody. I know a lot of two-spirit people who are just like super mask, right, or who are like super femme, and that's fine too. But I do think that within everybody there's masculinity and femininity. I just think that some people suppress their masculinity or suppress their femininity, and you see it a lot, and that's a trauma response, and that's like reacting to society, and you see it a lot in Native men. Actually, you'll see a lot of them who are hyper masculine, and then, you know, the pendulum swings so far into masculinity that sometimes it overdoes it and it turns into toxic masculinity. And that's not to say that all masculinity is toxic, because it's not. Masculinity is beautiful and it's vital. I think that Indigenous men who are masculine are beautiful, and they're important because they take up big roles in our community and we need them. But what I don't agree with is toxic masculinity, wherein we're hurting our feminine people, we're hurting our women, our two-spirit people, and we're allowing that masculinity to suffocate the room and to be shoved down people's throats. Ironically, a lot of people tell me I shove my sexuality down people's throats when all I'm doing is just existing and wearing makeup and maybe some heels. And that just gives a visceral reaction to some people because they don't love themselves. I love myself. I'm okay with who I am. I walk through the world with my head held high, and I love every version of myself, whether I'm masculine or feminine or somewhere in between. And there are a lot of people who don't love themselves. And when they see somebody having the audacity to live their life so free, it hurts them because they want to love themselves too. And they wish that they could unshackle themselves from that version of themselves that life and society needs them or tells them that they should be. And that's a prison. And I don't live in that prison. I'm just a little two-spirit creature just dancing around, you know, just living my life. And that's not anything super controversial. It's just a very simple truth. And it's one that not a lot of people, I think, can hear. And so, yeah, two-spirit is definitely for some people a mix of like balancing that masculine, that feminine. It's really about how I feel in the day. It's really about like where I am in my life. I find myself being a lot more masculine around certain people, or a lot more feminine when when my kind of guard is more down, and I'm feeling like a little bit kind of sassy or fiery, you know? So yeah, it just depends.
It's kind of like a dance in between.
Totally.
Like, in between like two worlds.
Absolutely.
And I think like people lash out when they start to question their whole worldview. And I think sometimes two-spirit and being two-spirit, it makes people question what they thought they knew about life, or what they thought they knew about their own history, and maybe even their own identity. So I think you just open up a whole world of people like questioning maybe themselves. It's programming, really, is what I'm trying to get at, because we've been programmed. Yeah, exactly. So when we talk about decolonization, it's almost like dismantling this programming of what we learned throughout the years. And I think two-spirit people do a lot of work just subconsciously by allowing people to question what they grew up with.
Totally. I always say we cannot have decolonization without honoring our two-spirit people, because our existence is decolonial. And like you said, like I come into rooms and I'm kind of labeled as a troublemaker sometimes, which I'm totally fine with. I'm a two-spirit troublemaker. I know that. But I don't see that as a bad thing all the time. Like I go into rooms sometimes and I'll have people like get physically uncomfortable with me being there. Oh, it's a man in a dress. Oh, it's like someone who's confused, or oh, he's coming after the children, or oh, he's a pedophile, or he's a groomer, or whatever, you know, these ideas that people have. When really all I'm doing is just existing and like just having a good time. And I have this teaching. It's less of a teaching, more of something I've discovered, but one that I'm trying to like kind of get some steam on and kind of trying to coin, which is this idea of yuhtin maskigia, where yuhtin means wind and maskigi means medicine. So wind medicine, kind of like whirlwind medicine, which I'm hoping to call my podcast when it comes out. Hey. But this idea of whirlwind medicine, wherein I enter a room and I'm like a cyclone and things get moved around and shifted, and you know the papers go flying and maybe the chair moves a little bit, and people see that as like, oh, he's hurting the environment, he's damaging us, he's changing things, we don't like it, like he's a menace, all these things. And sometimes I am a menace, but it's usually for a good reason. And after, you know, the dust settles and the wind kind of chills out, you'll start to realize that all of the things that have shifted naturally with the wind have kind of needed to. And maybe that, you know, chair looks a little better there, and maybe those papers needed to be shifted that way. And then people start to realize, oh, actually, that does kind of look better there. I didn't realize that that needed to happen, and that change was really uncomfortable for me. And I didn't like you bringing that out in me because I'm scared of change. And I want to go with the status quo, and I want to go with what the Bible has taught me. I want to go with, you know, what I'm programmed to think. And so sometimes it's as simple as me just walking into a room and just being who I am, and just watching the stares and like seeing people, like you can see it on their face where they're just like, this doesn't make sense. I need to box you somewhere and I can't. You don't fit into my boxes, and that angers me.
I think it comes down to control too. Because like for me, sometimes if things aren't in place, or they aren't perfect, or they aren't where I want it to be, it's like I have to let go of control of how I think things should be.
Yeah, because like what right do you have over the way that I present or the way I live my life? And sometimes, and this is kind of funny, but sometimes it's not even about any of that. Sometimes it's just about someone liking something that they don't think that they should like, and that they hate themselves for. There's so many, I get hit on by so many straight men who hate that they like me.
People denying an aspect of themselves.
Yeah, it's crazy. They're just like, they want me to be their dirty little secret. They want to love me in the dark, and they never want to honor me. And it's like, I'm not doing that. Like, I want to be honored. Like, I'm beautiful. I'm powerful. I deserve it. And we have so many of these people. Maybe they're not straight, maybe they're not gay, but they see something that they like, and it just triggers this thing in them where, I mean, that's why a lot of our gender fluid, or even people like me, who are like a little bit more gender fluid, or like our trans relatives, they deal with just despicable rates of violence, physical violence against them because of things that I just talked about, where straight men, I sometimes call them straight to bed. But these straight men will like go and they'll have their fun, and they'll use people. They'll exploit them. They'll use you like a napkin, crumple you up and toss you. Or like, and I've heard firsthand accounts from my two-spirit trans friends who will say like, it's really dangerous to make love, or it's dangerous to like date. It's dangerous to try to find partners, because they will say anything that they can to you to get you to lay in bed with them. And then when it's finished, that like post whatever clarity is sometimes such a shock to them that they get violent. They'll kill you, they'll attack you, they'll beat you up, they'll threaten you, they'll like blackmail you, they'll rape you. They'll like, all of these things happen so often. And I think it's like something like, you know, 2 in 4 trans people have experienced violence in their life. And like, it's so sad, but that's exactly what we're talking about when we talk about like decolonizing, or like making sure that we honor what we we honor who people are and where they're at, and we honor every version of them instead of, you know, you need to look like this, you need to act like this, you need to talk like this, Bible says this, da 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 da, or we have these laws and this and this and this and this and this, and that's like all of these rules, when we're all just spirit. And we're all just trying to move through this rock together and just have a good time in the meantime. And it doesn't really need to be that serious sometimes. Sometimes you can just like someone and that's it. And we don't need any labels. But sometimes we need labels. And Two-Spirit is just one of those things where I'm like, it's more for other people, less for me. I know who I am. I know what my roles are. And
well, I think you're a good example of what it looks like when you are proud of who you are and proud of all aspects of yourself. And yeah, I think I'm excited to see the future of what Two-Spirit people influence. And so that brings me to my next question is, when you think of Indigenous futurism, specifically for like Two-Spirit people, what do you hope to see happen?
I want to see Indigenous pop stars. Selfishly, I want to see like a lot of Indigenous celebrities just having a great time, taking up space at the Grammys and the Junos and the this and that.
You'll be there.
Well, as long as Tia Wood gets a Grammy, she promised me I'm going.
I've never heard you sing though, so maybe.
No, not me. It's not me.
Well,
I'm someone's makeup artist. I'm like doing the content for someone. That's my ticket in.
Okay.
But Indigenous futurism looks like to me so many movies and TV shows that we don't have to default to Reservation Dogs. We don't have to default to Rutherford Falls. Like there's too many to choose from that we just have like such a big catalog where we can have shitty Indigenous films and we can have amazing Indigenous films, and there be enough volume that we can have that, you know, and so not every single thing that comes out has to be the be all end all of Indigenous representation. I want there to be so many different schools. I want to see schools pop up all over the country, schools that teach us our languages, schools that are
like
funded.
Indigenous schools?
Yes. Okay, cool. I'm talking like on nations. I'm talking like really amazing institutions. I'm seeing some great ones being built already.
Yeah, me
but
too.
like we have the technology and the money in a lot of these nations to be teaching kids everything. Like the power of technology now, like even with like AI and things like that, like Indigenous people need to take advantage of all of that and like use it to reclaim a lot of the things that were lost. And that's what Indigenous futurism looks like to me, is adapting all of these like older sort of traditional methodologies and applying them to all of the amazing technology that we have now. Like we're sending people to space in like space hotels. Like we should be able to get some water to the nation that's like 20 minutes outside of the major city.
I know. Well, that brings me like, so what you had just mentioned, what do you want to name your podcast?
Yuhtin Maskigya, or Whirlwind Medicine with Kai.
Okay, so like I feel like that's the innovation and that's kind of creating the Indigenous futurism, and that's the win that's going to shake things up. But then a part of me is like, what do we keep still alive that's rooted in tradition? Right. You know, it's kind of like
we're really good at doing that. I think we're really good at bringing the history forward with us, and as long as we lead, like I'm stealing this quote from an elder in Treaty 6, and it was told to me by James McCookis, but he said that our young people are going to be leading our nations with a laptop in one hand and an eagle feather in the other. Yeah. And I truly believe that that's it. I'm seeing it happen already.
It's already happening.
We're doing it now.
Yeah, it's happening. Yeah. Well, and so moving on, like how can people support the work that you're doing after listening to this episode? Where can they follow you? Where can they check what you're up to? What do you have for the rest of 2023?
Well, they can support me by e-transferring me immediately.
True.
Just kidding.
Drop that.
No, you can
no,
find
but what's
me.
your e-transfer? Oh wait, do we have Venmo in Calgary, Canada?
No, we don't.
Okay.
Yeah, no, it's just e-transfer here. But follow me on all socials. It's just at Kairyn, OHKIRYN. And what's coming down the pipe for me? I don't think I'm allowed to talk about it, but two major projects. I was reached out to.
Okay.
I talked to you a little bit about them.
I think you talked to me about this.
Behind the scenes, off the record. So I'm super excited about if those happen. Those are going to take up my entire year. But I want land tournaments for Nietzsche Clan, our first tournament is happening. I want it to be inaugural, and I want it to be amazing so that we can continue to push money and opportunity and just possibility into Indigenous gamers' pockets and hands. And then I'm traveling to Colombia in a little bit to go back and visit my host family there. And I'm going back home, and I'm taking some time off. I went through a lot of big losses this past year. We lost 6 family members in the span of 4 months. And it was just absolutely like, I'm still not okay. And I'm like really transparent about that. Like, I'm struggling like really badly, and it's really affected my work a lot. And I'm one of those people who's a perfectionist, and having to put work to the side, or like missing deadlines, or like pushing work back because of just unsurmountable grief that is coming in waves and is like manifesting itself in different things, like not sleeping, or like eating poorly, or like even making like poor decisions with drinking and like things like that. Like, I'm trying to keep myself accountable, but I'm also like trying to meet myself where I'm at, where it's like, you just lost your brother, your sister, you lost your brother-in-law, you lost your auntie who was like a mom to you. She was the first person to tell me I was two-spirit. And I lived with her for so long, and she passed, and she was a matriarch in our family. And that was absolutely devastating. It was like one of the biggest losses of my entire life. And so that just happened 3-4 months ago. And so I'm going to go back home, back to Edmonton, back to the reserve, and I'm going to go back to ceremony. I'm going to be doing my best to really tackle my drinking habits. And I'm really like transparent with a lot of these young people that I talk to, where it's like, I'm not sober. I don't do drugs, but I do drink, and they see me drinking. I'm not like hiding it. But I'm really transparent about it. I'm just like, this is where I'm at right now, and this is what this version of me looks like. And I don't suggest you guys do it, but I'm doing it right now. And also I'm working on it. Like, I don't want to be drinking all the time. You know what I mean? So just always being really transparent about, where I'm at, and going home and just trying to heal in like all aspects of my life, like heal my body, which has been through hell. Like my eating habits have been so bad, my sleeping, my anxiety, like everything is just off the rails. I need to make sure I'm exercising, I'm feeding myself good food. And then I also want to just go to ceremony, and I want to like continue to do some hardcore therapy. I see a therapist every 2 weeks. I want to see somebody for which everyone should do if they have addicts in their life, is I'm going to go to Al-Anon.
Okay.
Which is a support group for people who have loved ones that are addicts. And I'm going to reach out and get a sponsor, and because I have like just a ton of PTSD from people in my life who are addicts, and I didn't realize that was a resource for a very long time. And then when I heard it was a resource, I kind of didn't take it too seriously, which I'm sad about, because I'm like, well, oh, okay, so it's like, how great could that be? I don't know why I felt that way, but now I'm like really gonna give it a big solid chance, and I'm hopeful. So that's what's coming down the pipe for me. It's not like super extravagant. It's actually the opposite, where I'm like taking like 2 months off of work and like not doing anything. But I think that's gonna be the best version of me, like the best move for me. And then once Kai gets back to where he needs to be, then I'm just gonna just explode back with all of my great projects and keep them on the go.
Well, I think it's dismantling perfectionism, and that, yeah,
it's hard.
I've been learning it, and I'm glad that you're actually taking actions and steps for your healing, because for me, I disassociate a lot, and I check out and act like nothing's happening, and then it starts to reappear itself. And my mom actually loves those meetings. So my mom has found a lot of like support, because my mom's also dealt with, my dad was an addict, so she would attend those meetings, and she still attends them like 20, 30 years later. So
yeah, I always tell young people, even if my life was perfect and there was nothing going on, I would still see a counselor. Counseling doesn't mean that you're weak. Nothing. In fact, it's preemptive. Like it's proactive medicine. It's making sure that you're equipped and you have support to deal with sort of anything that comes down your pipe. Even if it's like, oh, I got a paper cut. Oh, my life is over. Like, well, let's talk about it, I'm
not going through anything similar as to you. And I want to say, like, thank you for sharing that, and also just being so honest and truthful here. There's a lot of medicine in knowing where you're at, really, really where you're at. And I would say that for me, having gone through this past year and having said yes to everything because of that survival mechanism, I realized that I didn't have those systems in place for me to feel my healthiest or for me to feel supported. And so like you're saying, it's like about creating those systems all year round so that when we do maybe don't feel, or something happens in our life.
Not even maybe, something will happen.
Something will happen.
That's just the way life is. But you're ready and you've trained and you're good that when it hits, it doesn't rock you. You can just kind of, it'll graze you a little bit and you're like, oh, I know what this is. You know, we talked about this, or like, oh no, this devastating thing happened, but like, I'm here to immediately, I'm available to unpack it and to like get through it like as quick as possible. That's really what it comes down to, is just having those mechanisms and having that like mental fortitude and that spiritual fortitude to be able to like understand that life isn't perfect all the time, and that
awareness. I think every time that I've done something, I was kind of like going unconscious. You know, I think conscious me knows something's not right for me, but unconscious me doesn't really care. Like, you know, where you just go through those automatic behaviors.
It's a water thing. I don't know. Because like for me, I'm hyper aware. I'm like, I'm making a bad choice. Like I know it, but I don't stop myself. Because I'm kind of like, you know what? And this is maybe, it's not a hot take, but this is kind of something that I think is like, life is boring sometimes without a little bit of chaos.
Okay, no, this is me too. Shayla goes unconscious for the plot line. Not that Shayla wants to.
I'm like, this is character development. I'm like, how can I push the plot along? Like, I'm just going to like stir the pot a little bit.
And then you get burned and you're like, oh.
Yeah. Okay. And then, I'm like crying on my bathroom floor. I'm like, oh, I didn't want to stir the pot.
Why did I do this?
I hate pots.
Kairyn Potts. Hates pots.
Oh, everyone's been burned by a pots before.
I hope I never cross that bridge. I don't need that.
I'll introduce you to some of my cousins.
Oh, gosh. Well, thank you so much, Kai, for joining me on this show, for being the first in-person studio podcast guest. I loved having you here. I know the listeners loved listening, and also being just so open and honest about your story. I know a lot of Indigenous youth can relate to it, and I look forward to seeing what you create, and also just seeing what you don't create and just chilling for the rest of the year. Thank you so much for being here. And yeah, I'm so happy.
Yeah, Nanaskaman. I mean, I don't think any of the viewers saw it, but earlier you gave me tobacco. It's just sema or sema. And when you do that and I accept it, I have no other choice but to be transparent and to give my all. And if I held back and I was like, not being completely honest, or I was maybe not giving my full effort, that would be in direct violation of this spiritual contract that we've just made. So I wanted to say that, and thank you for doing that. Like that's important. It's things like that make sure that we have good conversations, and that when we're moving forward, it's in a good way. And I know that that's like such a big Indigenous cliche, is like, do it in a good way. But like, it's so true. So yeah, Ishnesh Nanaskuman, thank you so much for having me. Hi. And yeah, I'm a matriarch girly now. I guess I always was.
Right.
Matriarch movement girly.
Wait. Okay, last question. Who are matriarchs you're currently inspired by? You mentioned your aunt.
My auntie, my late auntie, Donna Potts, she saved her siblings, my mom included, her 4 younger siblings, from a house fire by carrying them one by one. She was only 11 years old. She threw them out the window and then carried them one by one out of this burning cabin. And the Queen of England flew over and awarded her a Medal of Bravery.
That was your aunt?
That was my auntie.
Wow.
She was incredible. She was like, just the most amazing woman. And so, yeah, we lost her a few months ago, and I'm still reeling from that. But she's definitely a matriarch that I look up to so much. My sister, Danessa Potts, incredible. My sister, Delona Potts. My late sister, who just passed very recently, 4 weeks ago, my sister Lorenda Potts, she was absolutely incredible too. I was raised by just the most incredible women who are just so tough. They just embody that word tough in everything that they do. They're so just special to me, and they taught me that femininity is not weak. It's beautiful, and it's like a raging river. It's healing and it's beautiful and it's soft, but it's powerful and it moves forward. And so that's what I try to do.
And what does the word matriarch mean to you?
Matriarch to me means divine femininity, and it means power, and it means esteem, and it means something to look up to, something to look forward to. It's comforting. And matriarch to me means leadership.
Well, I know your auntie is probably here right now and really proud of everything that you're still doing and still advocating for. And so I always call upon like my ancestors and my dad that's passed, and I feel like I channel him when I write or when I'm in like different things in my life. So I feel like she's always with you even though she's not here anymore.
Well, next time I beat you at pool, you'll know that's my auntie. She was like 4th in the world for like women's singles.
Let's not bring up the pool session.
You were on my team though.
I was horrible.
So
we played
bad.
pool. I was horrible. Okay.
It's okay. We almost won.
Well, thank you, Kai. I'll give you a hug. Just cracks.
They don't call me the chiropractor for nothing.